And with that, I'll get us started by going over the agenda and providing a brief introduction to this webinar series and the California Interagency Council on Homelessness. Next slide, please. Thanks, Gabby. So today's 90-minute session is for leaders and representatives from California tribes and for Continuums of Care interested in learning more about the benefits of partnering on homelessness solutions and counting people experiencing unsheltered homelessness on tribal lands. We'll start with an introduction, which will include a high-level overview of the purpose of this webinar series and provide a brief introduction to the California Interagency Council on Homelessness. We will then have two presentations. Vavila Blossoming Bear will lay the foundation for our learnings, and Peter Connery will lay the groundwork for partnerships and counting people experiencing homelessness on tribal lands. We'll then move into the panel discussion where Priest Martinez and Veronica Wilson will reflect on lessons learned in their partnership. After the presentations and panel discussion, we'll have time for questions from the audience. And then we will end with a quick survey and wrap up. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the Listen and Learn webinar series is to circulate tested models for solving common issues, to break down silos, and to build connections across local communities, and to build stronger communication between local, state, and tribal entities as we all work towards our shared goal to prevent and end homelessness in California. These themed sessions aim to create an interactive space where participants will learn from experts about useful resources, tested best practices, and innovative solutions to meet the challenges of homelessness that they face at the local level, share in meaningful discussions with each other to build lasting peer networks for future problem solving, and receive follow-up support from Cal ICH staff in the form of resource sharing, networking, and extra session peer learning work groups where appropriate. Next slide, please. And the goals of today's session are to highlight the benefits of partnerships for tribes and continuums of care, and to learn from an example of a local partnership to include tribes and tribal lands in the point-in-time homelessness count. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are not familiar with our organization, the California Interagency Council on Homelessness, or Cal ICH, is made up of secretary and director level representatives from 19 state departments and agencies, along with 2 community leaders who are appointed by the state legislature. The council's role is to align state departments and agencies so that the policies, resources, benefits, and services can be coordinated effectively to prevent and end homelessness all across the state. The council's work is guided by the statewide action plan to prevent and end homelessness, which is a 3-year roadmap for addressing homelessness in California. Cal ICH meets quarterly and is supported by several groups, including an advisory committee and the Lived Experience Advisory Board, or LEAB. The council is also working towards creating a future tribal advisory board in the next year or so. Next slide, please. Sorry, that was a busy slide, but just a real high-level overview. And in addition to the council, there's also a team of staff here at Cal ICH. We're organized into several divisions, each with a specific focus area to support this work. My name's Jeannie. I serve as the director of the Local Initiatives Division, the team responsible for putting on this webinar series. So the Local Initiatives team strives to strengthen partnerships and collaboration across the state to support local communities to prevent and end homelessness. We do that by delivering resources and information to help build stronger partnerships and provide direct support to local communities. We also work to amplify best practices, making sure that what's working in one place can be shared and adapted to enhance collaboration and improve system-wide responses. And finally, the division acts as a communication conduit, helping to connect different systems and partners so that together we can more effectively prevent and end homelessness. Next slide, please. So we are delighted to be partnering with Cal ICH's Tribal Affairs Division for this first Listen and Learn webinar. Our Tribal Affairs Division uplifts the needs, voices, and best practices of California tribes across our divisions with our council member agencies and departments for local communities and the public. And so without further ado, I will hand it over to Vavila Blossoming Bear to introduce herself and take it from here.
Good morning, and thank you, Jeannie. Next slide, please. So good morning again to everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. My name is Vavila Blossoming Bear. My people are from the Choctaw Nation. And that for some reason, someone came to my house and is knocking on my door right times that I start to speak, so please forgive me for any background noise when we get started in this introduction. But quiet, go lay down. My people are from the Choctaw Nation, but I grew up here in California amongst California tribes and other diverse communities. I'm an individual with next slide, please. I'm an individual with lived experience in homelessness. Over 2 decades working for, with, and on behalf of tribes, and it's my pleasure to serve as the tribal liaison for the California Interagency Council on Homelessness. Thank you. Next slide, please. We're delighted to share this space with an esteemed panel of community leaders making an impact. Peter Connery is Principal and Vice President of Applied Survey Research, a 45-year-old Santa Cruz area nonprofit specializing in community engagement and peer-centric participatory research. He has conducted over 150 point in time counts all over the country since 1989 and worked with Native American communities in Washington and Arizona in housing and other projects. Priest Martinez is from the Redwood Valley Little River Band of Pomo Indians. He serves as an empowerment and supportive services manager for Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority, which represents 9 federally recognized tribes. Veronica Wilson, MSW, is a program administrator with Mendocino County Social Services, which is a collaborative applicant of Mendocino County's homelessness response system, and serves as a lead agency in data collection. Veronica serves as the Mendocino County Continuum of Care coordinator and has been working in homelessness services since 2007. So you'll be hearing more from our panelists and presenters in just a moment. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So we want to pause before we get started to acknowledge and celebrate that we have a diversity of peoples in our audience today. Individuals working to address homelessness in local jurisdictions, as well as for tribal communities. If we have any tribal chairpersons or council members with us today and you feel comfortable, we invite you to please let us know in the chat. And for everyone else, some information. Tribal chairpersons are the equivalent of presidents of their nations, which are sovereign governments within California. It's been argued that they outrank all state government staff. Additionally, council members are often compared to the equivalent of federal cabinet members or legislators for their tribes. So, anyone who are in these categories and able to join us today, we thank you very much for your presence. Our coming together and our diversity focused on a common cause provides us the opportunity to learn from each other and build meaningful relationships. We thank all of our panelists and guests in advance for helping us to hold this space in the ways we communicate and work with each other. We also respectfully request that guests avoid mentioning identifying names of tribes or homelessness response systems in our questions and discussion later today. Next slide, please. Thank you. California has 109 federally recognized tribes and at least 81 tribes petitioning for federal recognition. This is the largest number of tribes in the United States. Each tribe has a unique culture and government with its own ordinances, bylaws, and processes. We also have a large Native American urban population comprised of members from California tribes, out-of-state tribes, and indigenous peoples from around the world. Next slide, please. Excuse me. I woke up with a cough today, unfortunately. Poor timing. Okay, so we've learned a lot from tribal communities throughout the state in the last few years. We don't have time to provide a comprehensive training on that within this presentation, but before we part today, we will provide you information on how to register for that comprehensive training happening in October. We also today are publishing the state of California's first tribal homelessness policy brief, which is information lifted up from tribal communities, corrects the record, and takes a much deeper dive into what we're just touching upon very briefly right now. This will be sent to everyone in the resources. Excuse me. So let's touch bases on data a bit. There is no current accurate source for data in tribal communities on homelessness across California. This is due to a lack of investment in collaborative data solutions. We invite our homelessness response system team members today to imagine, what if you had the highest rates of homelessness in your community, the lowest rates of social mobility and access, the highest rates of all poor outcomes across all government systems, and you don't have data to tell that story? Tribal communities, in part due to an absence of factual homelessness data, miss out on critical funding opportunities and solutions for their communities. The data system that local non-tribal homelessness response systems collect, also known as HMIS for those who know the lingo, does not record rates of Native American homelessness. It only records the Native individuals that seek assistance through these non-tribal services. Now, this data significantly undercounts the severity of homelessness California tribes are facing and does not represent their actual experience of homelessness. California tribes are experiencing homelessness rates of up to 40% of their population. This is compared with about 5% of California's population in whole. These numbers are individuals, families, youth, and elders who are not being counted and are being underserved as a result. We have the opportunity to include our California tribal relatives, to build partnerships, collect more accurate data, and to support homelessness solutions for all of our communities. We invite all local homelessness response system partners with us today to consider how existing mechanisms can be utilized to be more inclusive and just. And we're delighted to host the space to have this conversation. So I'll now hand it off to Peter to get us centered in some basics and continue our journey. Thank you.
Oh, Peter, you are muted. We cannot hear you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Let me start over. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this webinar, and thank you especially, Vavila, for highlighting the importance of data in social change, awareness, and education, especially within tribal communities throughout the state. And today, I'm going to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about a case study of one of those data collection efforts that we performed in Mendocino County with a collaborative with the county and the Northern Circle Tribal Collective under Priest's leadership. Next slide. Before I get into some of the details of that, I was asked to give a little background on the point-in-time counts and the point-in-time count infrastructure that exists throughout the country. As many may know, one of the largest funders of homeless services throughout the country is the federal government, and in particular, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. And they, as part of their distribution of funding, they require communities throughout the country to conduct a head count or a point in time count in the last 10 days of January throughout the country. And the results of that data are reported via the administrative body that administers HUD funding, which is called the Continuum of Care, or abbreviated as COC. And the COC is really a mandatory collective of cities in typically a county area, uh, a collective of city representatives, representatives of program administrators, representatives from the departments of education, and other key stakeholders in the county that have a role in providing homeless services. So the COC is the reporting body for the data that's collected during the point in time count, and has to enforce the HUD data collection rules and definitions on this data. So the point in time counts have a basic list of data reporting requirements that we have to follow. It's very stringent and heavily monitored. The result is accurate and valid demographic data about homelessness, and in particular, our goal in this collaborative was to develop that data on tribal lands. Some of the other goals of the overall point in time counts is to retain and improve funding for homeless programs, and including shelters and other services and behavioral health and general health. Uh, Increase community awareness of conditions and demographic characteristics. Link strategic program and policy planning um, programs to the community, and including efforts which are a high priority with HUD to mainstream, uh, to direct local needs to many of the mainstream services that exist, like Social Security and food stamps and other general population programs. And then, most importantly, one of the more important things for HUD is to make sure that local communities are measuring the effectiveness of their efforts, and hopefully making improvements uh, to the population. Next slide. So for our case study in Mendocino, and for those of you who may not know much about Mendocino, Mendocino is a northern California rural community, population of about 90,000. There's roughly 11 tribes in the county. I think I've got that right. And this map here indicates where the tribal lands are in Mendocino County. And you can see up in the red up there is the largest concentration, but the other areas, which unfortunately are fairly small, indicate some other tribal areas throughout. And in doing a data collection effort that focuses on tribal lands, obviously one of your first responsibilities is to identify where they are. And this map indicates, I think, a common theme among tribal lands throughout California, and it shows the diversity and how spread out uh, the tribal lands are. So your efforts need to be geographically inclusive and broad. Next slide. So one of the key steps for a successful point in time count effort that focuses on a Native American data collection is developing a good team. So working with the local continuum of care is what we think is one of the real critical efforts. to start your point in time count effort. Key to that is identifying tribal contacts to help the canvassing of tribal lands. Without that participation and contact, it's very difficult. And the tribal and continuum of care leadership team must agree on what the expectations of the point in time count effort are. And one of our experiences in Mendocino in this effort was to really ensure that we not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And successive point in time count efforts will show gradual improvement on methods and collection, and you don't have to be perfect right out of the gate. Tribal leadership should be the organizing body of outreach teams. We don't want strangers canvassing tribal lands. The COC can play a major role in training all participants to ensure that the HUD guidelines are followed and that we have appropriate tools and quality control in place to bring integrity to the data collection effort. The COC, as part of that effort, will supply maps, route coverage areas, data collection tools, and then general support for those teams. And then once the data has been collected during the process and in the review period, tribal leadership should review the data results that were collected and do basically a quality control check and for intuitive results to make sure that there were no gaps in what was collected. And then finally, once that data has been produced, it's shared with the COC leadership, and that COC leadership, in conjunction with the tribal contacts, review the data for inclusion in the final report, which goes to HUD and the general community. Next slide. This was done in Mendocino County, and this is a little graphic that shows some of the results of our most recent effort. The table on the right indicates some of the tribes and what the head count was in the particular areas and the location. And these results were similar to what we found last year. We've done this 2 times in Mendocino County. We found a few less this year than last year, but found again good distribution throughout. Next slide. So that concludes the general case study. One of the things that is super important with all of this is participation, and I was introduced to initially as someone who's a big advocate of peer-centric work, and included in that peer-centric work and outreach that we do is the importance of recognizing the contributions of the recruited peers that work on the study, and incentives to respond to survey questions and participate in the field work through financial incentives is one of the important components we recommend. And with that, I will turn the forum
Well,
back
I'll take it from here, if that's okay.
to Gila, and we can go from there.
Thank you, Peter. Such an informative discussion. May I ask a quick follow-up? Would you mind defining peer-centric for our audience?
Yep, peer-centric is that the enumerators, the teams that went out and canvassed were from the Native American tribes that were being studied. So we weren't sending folks that were unfamiliar with the tribal lands that they were canvassing. So in throughout our effort in Mendocino, we recruit persons experiencing homelessness to do that canvassing, and we continue with that peer-centric approach on tribal lands. So the data collection teams that went to all of the reservations and rancherias were all uh, Native American and had prearranged access to the areas that they worked in.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we'll now get started with our panel discussion and take a deeper dive. We'll get started first with Priest Martinez. Next slide, please. Priest, good morning again. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise today. So we were hoping you would share with us what inspired you to partner with your local continuum of care, also known, for those who don't know, as a homelessness response system. Thank you.
For me, well, thank you everybody for allowing me to be here. I think that one of the most important things that we didn't really understand as tribes in Mendocino County is that um, we didn't know there was a continuum of care, that was a part of HUD. And I think that when we got into the CDSS funding and had a requirement to be a part of the COC, it kind of gave us the understanding that tribes were not being represented at the COC board. And so what inspired us to partner with the Continuum Care is like being a part of the PIC count and the homelessness surveying. We realized that we were not being counted at all. We were just being counted in, our access to the motel rooms, having tribal membership that were only counted in the homeless shelters, and we were having issues within our own rancherias and reservations on tribal trust land, and we wanted to have a relationship with COC or be a part of the pit count. And I think that what inspired us the most is that when you get HAP funding, in order to have, correct data for us, we didn't have data. We were depending on a relationship with the state to create a data bank or data processing for us so we can have better resources for our tribal membership. And when I got introduced to Veronica at the COC, she was open, welcome armed. The membership at the COC, it was brand new to us, right? We felt, kind of like the person that's never been there before, and having an opportunity to be there as tribes, let alone we're a housing entity and all we do is respond to homelessness, and why were we not a part of the county department in social services for our county. So that's what inspired us, here at Northern Circle, to be able to get all the tribes in the county to be a part of the pit count, let alone still working on getting tribes to be a part of the continuum of care, because we want to have equal opportunity to be a part of all tables with when it comes to funding for the county, federal, and state. So that's what inspired us to get in there and having a great relationship with the continuum of care, and having a great board. And that's realistic is, the continuum of care board, the COC, to have, the open arms and saying, come on in, tribes, let's be a part of this. Let's get data together. Let's create a relationship, because I always felt we were isolated. Tribes do feel isolated in some part, and not a part of the bigger picture. But, for having the continuum care having, a great responsibility to give us all their knowledge and all policies so that, we can have a relationship for our future.
Thank you for sharing that. Some excellent takeaways from that first conversation. Key terms that I heard, equal opportunity and a seat at all of the government tables. So thank you for that. Next question. What went well in your collaboration that you think others might benefit from knowing?
I would say what went well is that for tribes to really have resources outside of tribal funding and tribal responsibility just to the area of the land that we have access to. Like we have tribal membership. There's always two processes for tribes. One is you live on reservation and you live off reservation, right? And so off reservation has a different types of services than on reservation. So what it is the collaboration of saying, okay, for us that are on reservation, we only get so much. Off reservation, they go and use the county funding. They use to go get services from the Department of Social Services, the COC, the welfares. So for us, went well with the collaboration is that we finally came together and talked about how we can support each other. If I didn't have a relationship with the COC and having the COC give me, the ability to be at the table and be a voting member at the COC, it's super important for tribes to be a part of that general membership that has a voting right to have a peace of mind to speak, when it comes to the continuum of care, when it comes to tribal HAPs, when it comes to HAPs alone, when it comes to the services that are rendered for all tribes and all members of each county. So for me, what went well is having a COC that gives information to the tribes and continues to knock at tribes' doors and offer a place at the COC where we can have a collaboration. And for me, it's not just the housing, it's social service part, right? There's a social service part that needs to be a part of the continuum care in relationship with the county. Because in my 5+ years of being in housing, we didn't know what the county has. We always assumed the county had their own funding for their own services. We didn't know that the services that they were providing for any member that within the county spectrums. And I didn't know that, Peter was the most important part of that for me to understand. Like it's from one part of the map to the bottom part of the map, and it goes all through the map and systems, and we're a part of that. Tribes are a part of that bigger picture within the map. And why are we not, I'm not saying not allowed, but why are we not at the table? Why are we not having relationships with the county and the COCs? And so I had great teachers that said, if you feel like there's a situation that needs to be addressed, go find out all the information. So my teachers were like, you'll be a part of the board, see what happens. Bring that information back and talk to the tribes and tell them like this is the part that we're missing, right? Tribes have a big problem of always thinking like we only get a small portion of what is available when it comes to state and federal funding, right? I don't think that we utilize all the resources that we have, but it's the relationship that I had with the COC that made us kind of understand there's a bigger picture. And if we could collaborate together, we've been a part of the COC, I think over a year, maybe 2 years going on now. And it's been important for us to collect these things. Like data is one of the most important things because we're not expert collectors at data. When somebody says, when you want to write a grant and you want to utilize data, you got to have an expert do the data collecting for you. We're not experts on that. So we have to rely on other organizations that collect data from us. So we are over here trying to find our own data. We could go to tribal health and everybody that puts on there, we are homeless, and we could collect that data, but is it validated data? According to state policies, according to federal policies. So we had to change our mindset of this is how we're going to help get supporting. Like Peter was important for him to have conversations with me to even be open and transparent and tell me those things that are important for us to collect and be a part of these things and also to fight for those things, right? Be assertive in finding these things. And, I might, I think the first year we had with the data collecting was beautiful. I love Veronica. She helped us all the way through. But then there is some kind of roadblocks in there that we're going to figure out. But I think that if you are a tribe or if you're a COC, please, please, please get a tribal liaison from your county that has relationships with the tribes so we could get those tribes to the table. We can't not give enough information to our people that we are working for, and that's the people that we serve. And this is where my heart is, that I think that I'm not doing my job if I'm not serving my community to the best of my ability. And in order to do that, I have to have relationships with COC. I got to have relationships with the state. I got to have relationship with HCD. I got to have relationships with with HUD, with and Nahasda. I got to have relationship with ONAP. And this is the part where the collaboration made me think outside the box. For us, get permission to go on tribal land, it was pretty simple, but you got to have the right person there. And that's why I say have the right person be your tribal liaison that knows the tribes in the county so we can have permission. We could find those experts because you're not going to have somebody else come outside the entity and say they're an experts for the tribe. The tribe are the experts for the tribe. Get that person in there in the COC, give him a seat at the table, give him the relationship that he needs so you could build these things. It's important for us to have data collecting, and it's important for us to go after more than just what we're allocated with funds with tribes. And I think that's the important part with these collaborations. I mean, look where we are today. We're having webinars now talking about how we build these relationships based off of, I'm not saying we were the first tribes to do pit count on tribal land, but I know it was important for us to have this in Mendocino County because after the first one, tribes were excited to see the numbers. They knew the numbers were there. They just never been collected in the way that we did when you had Peter come in with his entity, his organization to have these things. And so for me, I really, really, really harp on, getting COC to reach out at least to the social service departments of the tribes, getting that individual that does this work on a daily basis, get them on a place on that COC board and get them in there and having them share those resources. We're lucky enough to have Mendocino County realizing that, tribes are not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. We've been here. We just want to be a part of the bigger picture, whether it's our old past relationship, that's in the past. Our relationship move forward is we need to have collaboration, with ICH having these things and having these topics brought up for us. It's important that we have these things because we want all tribes to be a part of the bigger picture. We want all tribes to be, in a place that we never were 10, 20, 30 years ago. We need to change that dynamic with that. So I think the collaboration that where we started here has built us up to where now we're working with ICH. Now we're working with HUD. Now we're working with HCD. Now we're working with these entities that we've never had in my previous reign. And I know 45 years ago when Northern Circle started, we only worked with that small budget, Indian Housing Block Grant, the Indian Housing Plan. That was our money for housing. That was our money for homelessness. That was that. It's different now, and we got to be able to outreach, outsource, and get more collaboration and more benefits to the people we serve. So that's my take on, having the benefit of, having a collaboration with the COC board. And it's important for me. And I think that I could teach COC boards, how do we do it? You find the right person. You find the right person that has relationships with tribes that could go, tear down some walls or has a relationship and trust, because it's important for every person in the county to be counted. Whether it's just the county part, it's important that every person that's homeless to be counted and be a part of that pit count, because, and that's the truth. If we want more funding when it comes to homelessness, we got to be able to create data. And so for me, that was the most important part because I'm underserving my tribal membership if I'm not allowing them to be part of the count. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. It was so informative. And we'll be going to our other panelists in just a moment. But before we do, I just wanted to pause on just a few of the many key points and takeaways I received from that conversation. Um, Data is one of the most important things needed. Um, it's time to move forward in collaboration. Isolation, silos are the thing of the past. It's important to utilize your local tribal liaisons, and also I imagine, if there are entities without designated tribal liaisons, who are the champions? And then you also highlighted throughout just the importance of relationship with everyone, tribal communities, local jurisdictions, everyone involved. So we can come together, understand each other, and tribes can bring their expertise to the table. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And thank you. I want to acknowledge, thank you for your question in the chat. We'll be getting to questions in just a little bit. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Veronica Wilson, MSW. Thank you for joining us today. How has your homelessness I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, it's
How-
okay. I was just going to say thank you for having me. It's a really great honor to be invited to this and to be able to represent our work. So thanks, Vivi.
Oh, thank you. It's our pleasure. How has your homelessness response system shared power and decision-making with priests and other representatives in the planning and execution of the points in time count?
I'd like to back up a little
Okay.
bit in our COC processing that brought us to our point in time count planning and really set the stage for a lot of the relationships that we had. Our Continuum of Care Governing Board decided that we needed to have a restructure in how our governing board was made up, the structure of it. We had 18 seats and we were struggling to have a quorum of members for a lot of our meetings. And we were looking at who was represented, what our COC wants to have voiced, and the voices that we want to make sure are elevated on those on that board. And so we reduced it down to 9 seats. And instead of each seat having a dedicated purpose, we identified 4 dedicated categories, and the remaining 5 seats were open to any eligible entity or individual that might be interested. One of those dedicated seats is for a tribal government or a tribally designated entity. And by carving out that space in a position of power, our Continuum of Care communicated, not just in its policies, but in its actions, that we value the voices of our tribal communities, and that our tribal governments not just invited to the seat, but dedicated space where they have representation and a voice. I'm proud to be able to share that Priest not just only serves as that governing board member in that dedicated seat, he has also willingly taken on the responsibility of serving as our vice chair for the governing board. So he has not just the role of attending meetings and coming to committees and participating. He leads our meetings. He can represent us in the community. And that in and of itself shows the respect and the dedication that our Continuum of Care has to this level of work. That set the stage for everyone knowing in our Continuum of Care, everything we do needs to incorporate our tribal communities and our partners. And the most obvious place to start was was the point in time count. We've historically had some outreach workers who had relationships with a tribe or two who could go out and do surveys and find out, what was going on. But HUD always had us keep that separate. It wasn't representative. It was only the folks, the tribes that we actually had relationships with. And it was really kind of going to the gate and knocking and saying, hey, how's it going? What's going on? And that wasn't enough. We knew that wasn't enough, but we didn't know what else to do. And so when the governing board carved out that space, it said, okay, bring them in. Who's going to come in? Where are they? And it had been that Priest had found out about us, and that's really his involvement in it really is what spurred all of that work by the governing board and the continuum of care. And so I knew we need to have Northern Circle, Indian Housing Authority, and any other tribes that are interested. We need to have them at this table, not just for the governing board, but also our committees. And so I worked with priests to talk about, these are the different areas that we do. These are the different policies that we're responsible for, those written standards and the policies and procedures that we're all of us COCs are required to do. I sat down and explained all of that to him, and he agreed. Point in time count. Let's do that. Like, we're not in your data and we need to be. How do we get there? How do we get the data to actually represent us? And it was obvious. It's the point in time count and our homeless management information system. So Priest had also, I really gotten to know him under ESG-CV because Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority had received ESG-CV funding for non-congregate shelter and street outreach. Did you guys have street outreach? Maybe it was just the other two. Yeah, you did. And so what do they do? So of course, we welcome them into our HMIS. We created programs for Northern Circle as well as Manchester Bay Point Arena Band of Pomo Indians and the Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians. And so they actually had projects in our system. We created new local HMIS data elements to collect which tribe they were a member of. And so we carved out space also in our point in time count committee. They have a dedicated seat on that committee. And in our planning with ASR, with Peter and that team, we knew asking them to come to our committee meetings wasn't enough. Because just carving out space doesn't mean that they have the capacity to fill that space. And so we also did dedicated planning outside of those meetings with Priest, and we would meet with a few tribes here and a few tribes there, and just kind of just feel it out and what people want to do. And Priest really did a lot of that interaction and engagement and reporting back to us, like, this is what we need and this is how we should do it. We had a dedicated training that Peter ran just for the volunteers and tribal members that were going to be counting on tribal lands. And we made sure that they had what they needed. They had the training, they had the resources. And we also made sure they had a dedicated point person that they could contact in case they ran into anything in the field. And so there's a lot more that I could share, but I think that that's enough for that question right now.
We got so much from that. Thank you. And I want to lift up one of the first things that you said, the importance of communicating, not only in our policies, not only in the things we say that we value our tribal communities, but demonstrating that in our policy content and in our actions. you know, because some folks from the tribal community have had the experience of, you know, working with government entities, and they'll, you know, maybe they'll say they value their tribal relationships, but they're not putting in the work for it. So thank you for lifting up the importance of the operationalization of that. A few other, so another thing I want to lift up, having the tribal affiliation in your data. So we are told on a regular basis from tribal communities that they would like COCs to do that. What an accomplishment. Thank you.
We're working on launching that system-wide because we did it specifically for those ESG CV tribally funded projects. But we're, you know, looking at how we can do that with our mainstream providers as well.
Very cool. Okay, what has been most valuable for you within Mendocino's tribal inclusion and partnership thus far?
So there's the perspective of what has been most valuable to the continuum of care. And then there's also what has been most valuable to me. And I think that that's really important to talk about when we're in these spaces. So starting with the continuum of care, our tribes and these tribal lands are located in very remote areas. Mendocino County has 10 federally recognized tribes within our jurisdiction, and there's one not recognized, but is a very large community, the Yokayo tribes. And when you start, one thing that I have learned is there's dozens of tribal representation within each one of those tribes. Um, we're the home to multiple historical tribes, but others were relocated here. Growing up in Mendocino County, I know a lot of the history. And so that tribal inclusion in those remote areas translates in our COC application to we're covering more of our jurisdiction. We're getting more representation of our services. We're gaining more access. We're becoming more diverse and addressing equity within our not just access to services, but delivery of them. Northern Circle is working on launching as a coordinated entry front door location where they would do screenings with anyone that walks in that's interested, but obviously dedicated to those tribal members that don't trust the mainstream system to come in. Maybe we've served them and failed. And so it increases our equity and inclusion. We get a diverse representation much more diverse in how we're planning things. It's not just priests that's at the table, but a lot of the staff members, Travis and Alicia and many of the others who, you know, it's not just priests at the table. It's their community. They're not just their staff, but we've also got, you know, councilwomen and chairwomen from these organizations who serve in other capacities in our community. The chairwoman from Hopland Band of Pomo Indians also serves as an executive director for Indigenous Wellness Alliance. And so having that dual role brings in so much more diversity in how we are planning and delivering services. That leads to better planning, better distribution of services, and it just, you know, all those things that HUD values. This is it's the heart of those things, but it goes way beyond what HUD wants of us. This is our local community. These are the original protectors and of these lands. They have gone through so much that I cannot even begin to speak to that in this forum. And it is my responsibility as a COC coordinator to ensure our COC is aware we need to create space. We need to honor this. We need to have respect for tribal sovereignty. We need to make sure that we build relationships, not just with the tribes, but each individual tribal nation. They are individual sovereign nations. And I'm working to build 10 individual relationships, 20 relationships, and I'm nowhere near there. Trust me, I've got like maybe 3 or 4 if I'm lucky. And it's not easy work, but it's probably the most important work that I have the privilege and honor to be able to work on. We owe them our lives. We owe them everything. And the least we can do is make sure that they have a space at the table and that we honor and respect them.
Wow, you've shared such powerful words. So many quotable and powerful sentences. If I could share a few of those that hit my spirit. One of the things you said, this is all the things that HUD values and more. Equitable access and delivery of services, better planning, better distribution of services, and also the power of creating a space for diverse conversations. So thank you so much. And to each of our panelists and presenters, we have so much to learn from you. And if we had more time, we'd just be talking all day. But we're going to go to our time for questions and answers to make sure, for our folks in the audience, if they have anything specific they need to know. We'll also share a few announcements, including opportunities to learn more about this work. So thank you again, Veronica. And with that, I'll request the next slide. Okay, so this is our time for questions and answers. So you have 2 ways you can ask questions. Please feel free to raise your hand. And once you do, you'll be called upon to unmute when it's your turn. The other method is to ask a question in the chat. And with that said, I did see we got our first question earlier today. So if it's okay, I'll get started with that one now. And that was from Elizabeth. And it was, what next steps would you suggest for a COC to identify who a good tribal liaison would be for their community? And I'm going to open that up to whomever on our panel or our presenters has something to share with that.
Reese, do you want to say anything or do you want me to get started?
You can first.
Okay. I got lucky. I got lucky that Priest was curious and he wanted to know more. And he came to us and we were able to run with that. But for those of you who aren't quite as lucky and don't know who your champion is yet, my recommendation is to research which tribal nations are in your jurisdiction. Research when they meet. Research if there's a tribally designated housing entity or TDHE in your community. That's what Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority is, and they have established relationships with every single one of the tribes, whether they're a consortium member or not, whether they're part of the consortium or they partner on funding or they all know each other. And once you start going to meetings, going to the board meetings for those THDEs or the council meetings, just go listen and learn. and introduce yourself after to someone that seemed to maybe speak to you, or that you thought maybe they would be interested in this kind of work. But it's about researching your local community, about finding out where those champions might be, and not giving up, because I've had dozens of relationships. Some lasted weeks, some have lasted years. They're all a little bit different, and I've learned something from every single one of them. And so show up and listen, and when you find that right person, you'll know.
And for me, I would reach out to if the tribe has a housing department, that's the person that we contact. And if not, we know every tribe has a social service department, and that's the other person that does boots on the ground and will be a part of, understanding the need to have relationships outside of the tribe. So for me, those are the two biggest departments, besides going to the tribe and asking to be put on the agenda for a tribal council meeting, so you could, share your resources and ask for the right person to be a part of the board, the COC board. Otherwise, tribes will usually delegate a department head, a director, or a manager to be a part of it to bring back the information to the tribe. But to me, the two biggest departments are, housing and social services, and every tribe has a tribal administrator that could get you onto the tribal council agenda for a board meeting.
Great, thank you. Peter, I'll just pause to see if you had anything you wanted to add before we continue.
I think Priest and Veronica covered most of it. I would just like to reinforce the value of tying into existing leadership structures within it. You don't starting from scratch and trying to recruit people is hard work, but being able to tap into existing leadership at a wider multi-tribal level is the way to go, and identifying that leadership.
Excellent feedback, thank you. And I also, in responding to this question, I'll also respond from another kind of context. So, what next steps would you suggest for a COC to identify who is a good tribal liaison for their community? So if we're talking about someone from the COC, say, the COC doesn't have a tribal liaison, who are the best people to outreach and be with community? I would suggest people who have demonstrated cultural humility, conflict resolution skills, people who understand the history and the story. And ideally, of course, it's people from the community, but if they're not from the Native community, perhaps they have other community experience with other underserved communities that they can bring to their role. And I'll just flag, so we do have a resource list that will be shared out, and in that resource list, we have a fancy map in which all COCs can click on their region and find out which tribes are in their region, and that's one of the many resources that are on their way. So with that, I'll take a pause. Do we have any other questions right now? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. Look into our ICH team. Are we seeing any folks?
Not seeing anybody's hand up right now or any further questions in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'll ask a follow-up question if you don't mind, and then we'll do a wrap-up if there are no other questions. And this is actually for you, Veronica. So what are the first steps you had to take within your COC to prepare people for real partnership?
Oh. Well, I know for myself, so that I would be ready to be able to answer the questions of our, our COC members. So I needed to do research on our local history. I'm currently doing research into what were called the Mendocino Wars, the war that was waged against Native Americans in remote Mendocino County in the late 1800s. History on Bloody Island. It's not in Mendocino County, but it's still, culture is culture, and our tribal communities do not see the boundaries that we create for ourselves. The massacre that occurred there, and understanding those impacts on this community and on these peoples tempered my heart to be strong enough to not waver when people say, why does this matter? Why are we doing this? Why are they so special? I would hope that I would do the same kind of partnership if we had our Latin American community step up to the table, that we would do the same. But I don't know if it would come in the same way. This is special. This is unique. And so I had to have the strength to stand up and say, well, this is why it's important. And if I didn't have that knowledge and understanding behind me, I may have wavered. And then, well, I don't, well, it's important because of X, Y, and Z. It gives actual like reasons on why this is important. ICH, in partnership with HCD, published the history of our California tribal communities. And it's a really great workbook. It's available on, I think it's the ESG HCD website. Anyone can access it. It's a publicly available, but it's dedicated to COCs. So I had shared that with our governing board, as well as our full membership and our large distribution email list of 120 plus people. And I said, this is important. We need to know our history so that when we have these interactions and we have these opportunities, we bring the respect that needs to be demanded in these conversations and these interactions. And so that was the real big first step for me. And then the second step was ensuring that everyone else understood that as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I'm not seeing any other questions from the audience. So Priest, I hope you don't mind if I ask you a similar question. So we know in our tribal communities, there can be, historic trust issues with local, state, federal governments due to the history, How did your team prepare your your tribal housing authority to work with local county folks? What were the first steps?
For us, it's having the assertiveness to know how to communicate. It's like knowing your audience, right? If I come in there with the wrong attitude, we just create more issues than needed, And so I learned how to speak correctly, and I learned how to be assertive, and learn how to catch attention to the topics that we have passion for, right? We have over 180 years of housing instability. We're the first homeless people of this land, let alone, we get what they call a set aside, right? So we get crumbs on everything else everybody gets. And it's taking it to the places there need to be to say, look, we're going to need some type of help and support. We're not asking for a whole lot. We're just asking for a partnership. We're asking to sit at tables where we need to be, and we're asking for these things. And you got to be, with that, you got to be able to say, take all those things in the history and past and take it and be able to correctively say it in a good way, so that we're not victims. We're not victims. We're not going anywhere. That's the thing. We're not going anywhere. And we've been a part of California. We still fighting for our citizenship. Our citizenship has never been ratified. Like those all things go through our mind every day, right? And housing insecurity, let alone we have set aside of, maybe a 5% of a big budget of over $10 million, and we get like a 0.5% of that funding source. Those are the things we got to change. And that's going to happen with the relationship with other entities because we can't do it alone sometimes. Sometimes we think we can, but we can't. And that's creating the right person to go in these conversations and have and sit on these panels and sit in these spaces that need to be heard because I could go up and down California to the tribes, but I can't do it in the COCs. I can't go to county buildings and entities and have relationships. That's got to change. I mean? California's got to stand and back each other with California memberships. That includes tribes that are over and isolated. And, our tribes are, far in the country, without resources, not the whole lot of resources, but they're still a citizen of California. And that's what we're trying to be recognized as, as the equal partnership for California, and that's what we fight for. We want to be a part of that. We want to be a part of the bigger picture, and we want to have access to everything.
Thank you for sharing that. So I want to acknowledge, thank you, Veronica. She placed the California Housing and Community Development's ESG programs, California Tribal Nations Handbook. This was done with the support of a tribal contractor. So that's one thing in the chat. I'll ask my team, are there any more questions or are we good to move on to our next item?
I think if there's no more questions, we can move on. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you again. Next slide, please. So I'll hand it to Jeannie. Are you good for this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know Vivila mentioned this a little bit ago, but we're really excited to announce that the Tribal Affairs Division is partnering with the Pala Band of Mission Indians to host a two-part tribal engagement training. So this training is designed specifically for continuums of care and will focus on what COCs need to know to successfully engage with tribes. So participants will walk away with hands-on tools for engaging respectfully and effectively with tribal communities. Part 1 is on October 29th at 10:30, and part 2 is the very next day, October 30th, also from 10:30 to noon. So we really encourage all COC representatives to attend both sessions and take advantage of this important opportunity to build stronger, more respectful partnerships with tribes. Oh, and I see we put the links to register in the chat. Thank you so much. And next slide, please. So as soon as we end this call, a survey will pop up on your screen. We request that you please just take a couple of minutes to complete this quick survey. This is your chance to provide feedback on today's session and suggest ideas for future webinar topics. Your feedback and participation are critical in helping us improve and continue to offer meaningful sessions like this one. Please also keep an eye out for the follow-up email in the next week or two. I know we mentioned that we'll be sending everyone a resource sheet. We'll also be sending you a copy of today's PowerPoint and a link to the recording of this webinar. And we will also post all those documents on the Cal ICH website. And lastly, if you're looking for more support, please don't hesitate to reach out to us directly by email at calich.bcs.ca.gov, or you can reach out to Vivila or myself directly as well. We've got our information here. And I just want to thank everyone for attending and thank the panel so much. This was a really beautiful discussion, lots of great information, great next steps. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good to see you.
Thank you, everyone.